of the land of Nod where Cain was exiled, but she who exiles herself to the Arctic to try and make sense of the terrible crime and her own soul's journey through it. In Murder Ballad in the Arctic, she says, I thought the Arctic summer, that region of never night, might be a place I would write about my friend's murder. The main plot points in this book are her son's birth, this terrible murder, and her failed marriage. The book's scope is wide and asks big questions about life's beginnings and life's ends, with the speaker's wild mix of desires and questions permeating all. Tracy's voice is insistent and not only self-revelatory, but she challenges her readers as well. When someone offered to hurt me any way I wanted, I put their hand around my throat, that time choosing it. Where do you keep your secrets? I once had a teacher who said that no poem is worth writing that does not take risks. This book is full of risks. I don't know if I've ever read a book of poems that is so fearless. Please welcome Traci Brimhall.
Thank you, Sally, so much for that beautiful introduction. I got to do manuscript consultations one year with Sally, and I know exactly how long ago it was because my son is now 7 and he was 5 weeks old the last time I was in Palm Beach. So it is so great. I went to my very first Palm Beach Poetry Festival in 2005 and worked with Sharon Olds, and have been back, came back for numerous years as a participant. Got to work with the fabulous Gregory Orr, who was interviewed today by the amazing Laure-Anne Bosselaar, Major Jackson, Claudia Emerson, Dorian Locks. So I came back many years to study with really great poets and spend a week just being among poets and with poets. And thank you also to Susan and Jennifer and Marcy, and dear sweet Miles, who I know is out there, though I can't see his beautiful face, as well as a shout out to the best intern ever, Brittany. She's been saving me already this week, and I know she will save me many more times. And I'm incredibly grateful for the work that interns do. It's often, underthanked and underappreciated labor. But I want to say also that it was an intern that actually chose my book for my press, that I didn't know fancy people that passed it on to fancy other people that put it in the right hands and the stars shone brighter. My book got into an editor's hands because an intern read it and said, you have to read this, and passed it on. And so I want to say that that happens at journals and that happens at presses, and that it's right now an intern is saving me in a whole new way too. And so I just want to say thank you to Brittany, and also to say thank you to everybody who does forms of unpaid labor in literary service, because it's a beautiful thing that you do that helps the community keep going, and helps work be read. So thank you for what you do. The first poem I want to read tonight is because it's one of my only non-downer poems. So we can maybe start someplace a little bit happy. Although I will say one of the poem's secrets is that it's actually an elegy. It was written after the love was over, but it was exciting to me to write a love poem. This is Love Poem Without a Drop of Hyperbole. I love you like ladybugs love windowsills, love you like sperm whales love squid. There's no depth I wouldn't follow you through. I love you like the pawns in chess love aristocratic horses. I'll throw myself in front of a bishop or a queen for you, even a sentient castle. My love is crazy like that. I like that sweet little hothouse mouth you have. I like to kiss you with tongue, with gusto, with socks still on. I love you like a vulture loves the careless deer at the roadside. I want to get all up in you. I love you like Isis loved Osiris, but her devotion came up a few inches short. I'll train my breath and learn to read sonar until I retrieve every lost blood vessel of you. I swear this love is ungodly, not an ounce of suffering in it. Like salmon and its upstream itch, I'll dodge grizzlies for you. Like hawks and to skyscraper rooftops, I'll keep coming back, maddened, a little hopeless, embarrassingly in love. And that's why I'm on the couch kissing pictures on my phone instead of calling you in from the kitchen, where you are undoubtedly making dinner too spicy, but when you hold the spoon to my lips and ask if it's ready, I'll say it is, always, but never, there is never enough. In Sally's introduction, she mentioned the tensions of death and life happening a lot in the book. I was pregnant with my son when the trial for my friend's murderer was happening. And so there's constantly a tension and a push and a pull. The other push and pull that happened a lot is a series of poems that came up. And they came up because they were one night stands first. And I want to promote one night stands to you all in the poetic form. Your personal romantic choices are your own to make, and I support whatever they are, if they're as long as they're consensual. But I mean for poems that I think sometimes we're like, oh, we just really want to make great poems and send them out to be published. And, you know, there's this constant need for external stuff. And I think you should have poems that are just for play. You're just going to hang out and do that thing that night, and you're not trying to make them become something else or turn into anything else and ask what future they have. You should just play and just like have something that you just mean to play with for a night. And that's really beautiful and great. And so I had a series of poems called Dear Thanatos whenever I was between books in the past. So many of these are many years old. I would just write to my darkness, and my darkness always wrote back. It was always really weird. I never understood it. But it was a fail safe. Anytime I wanted to write, I just wrote to my darkness, and my darkness answered. I also loved hearing Gregory Orr talk about the anthology because I heard Gregory speak about that years ago at Palm Beach. And I've been on my beloved quest ever since, and I hand copy mine. And I do recommend that same assignment because it's like all these poems that you know and love and have even memorized start to invite you in for coffee. All of a sudden it gets a lot more intimate when you start hand copying these poems that you love. I still have not whittled it down to 15, but maybe I will. And I bring that up right now too to say, if you recognize the beginning of this poem, it's because it is Gerard Manley Hopkins. Dear Thanatos, I'll not kiss your lion limb, not lap back the rattle in my ribs like a lone pill going to powder in an orange plastic bottle. Not sing any more of the wretch and wrestle. No more ministers to drive words through my wrists and leave me for the patient circles of scavengers. No, you didn't kill me. Not because some days, yes, I wished for it, but chose a different courage. I stopped asking the mirror for a dream and opening it like a door. I wished to welcome back feeling, that whole mansion of trembling rooms. Wished to break every window, let the light storm through. On my knees, I wished for tempest, for rack and screw. I asked for churchless pleasures to disturb my numb comfort, wanted to lick and wallow, wished to swallow the laugh out of my child's mouth, and, my God, wished for even the shame of an apple. Now my wishes are down to 2, staying alive and wanting to. So I caught feelings for my one night stands, and the Dear Thanatos poems, I was like, I feel like they belong in this book. I feel like I had these other things that I thought I was pursuing, but I believe they need to be along for the ride. But things changed when I felt like it needed something else, something to balance. And I'm going to come back to that comment, but I started painting in the pandemic. I practice every day. And I was very impatient that I wasn't getting better until I did 2 different things. One was I stopped to reflect on what we make students do all the time of like, write your reflection at the end of the semester and what did you learn? And once I started to pay attention to the choices I was making and figure out what was working and what wasn't, rather than always wishing it came together and was perfect the whole time, I started to improve because I understood the choices I was making and how to improve. Once you add a shadow, a painting pops because then it becomes 3-dimensional. So adding something that it's the opposite is my whole class on tension and making it come forward. And all of a sudden, when I started writing to something that I loved and my will to live rather than my will to die, I got a whole different kind of poem, and it was very chatty. The other thing I noticed is when I did a painting for somebody that I cared about, and all of a sudden I was more patient. I took my time. I didn't get as frustrated, And I just felt like when the audience is somebody that you care about, I think you write a different poem. So thinking about who's on the other end of a poem, who do you love? And I hope sometimes the answer is also yourself. But I think when you're thinking about writing and your audience is somebody that you care about, I think it changes the nature of the poems that you write. So this is Dear Eros. It's another series that appears constantly in the book. Dear Eros, I asked my son which part of his body he loved most. He said his skeleton. I always used to think I loved my toes. A quarter of my bones splayed into fans, the nerves so bright and easy to please. A friend's daughter showed me the bones she'd filed in an old card catalog. I handed each one back, the dull heat of rot traded for the glare white of a bare rib, fleshless cradle of hip, heft of femur on a mantle. She and I shared our love of lemons, and she taught me which in her made-up language so I could call myself by the proper word, the invented one. I held myself against the hard belly of those vowels, that black glyph of a name. The pulse I once felt when my son turned inside me thrummed against my hand. Tonight, the splinter I let live in my thumb finally worked its way out of my flesh, the wound larger than the weapon. I asked my son which part of his life he loved most. He said, crying, because it felt so good to stop when he was happy again. The daughter shows me the thin hair of roots whitening the soil in a jar. She has made this small wilderness and given it life. When my marriage was failing, I offered to take care of my friend's succulent. It was almost winter. Everything was going gray. So when the plant began to bloom, I welcomed its dusty pollen until the kitchen smelled like carrion and bone dust. The house grew heavy with need. With an ache, I understood. The smell of death was simple answer. I knew what those fetid yellow stars were at the back door to invite the flies to their desire. And the last poem I'll read is again my only other attempt in the book to write things that aren't a total bummer. I will say that the quote that's shouted at the end is really what the veterinarian doing the necropsy on the racehorse Secretariat did shout. And Secretariat, if you don't know, is a very famous racehorse. I've never even seen a racehorse, but I know Secretariat is famous for a genetically enlarged heart. And it really was something that I heard once that a monk did was meditate to make his heart an ocean so he could absorb the pain of others. And I just thought, man, that guy's like Professor Xavier. He can just like reach out and mind heal people. That's awesome. And that's what I always wanted to do with my life. So I'm a poet, I guess. So this poem is called Contender. Thank you everyone for still trying to connect with people over language this week and coming to these events. And thank you again to Sally and Miles and Susan and Jennifer and Marcy and Abby that I've just met, and I can't wait to hear Tim and Brian read tonight as well. Contender. It's all right to overdress for the riot. Your rage is stunning. It's all right to pursue the wrong pleasures and the right suffering. Here's my permission. Take it. It's all right to replace a siren with a bell. Your emergency should make its music. It's all right that the meter reader broke your sunflower in half. You knew better than to plant it where you did. Sometimes it's all right if you call your waiter honey when you order sweet tea. It's all right if you fall out of love with being alive, but rise again tomorrow with French pop songs and fresh croissants. Wear all your gold to church and try, really try, to believe anything but a stethoscope can hear your heart's urgency. It's all right that your mother died. So will your father and your son, but hopefully not before you. It's all right to lay naked in the rain and refuse to go inside, even when the moon tries to make your cold thighs shine. It's okay to lick the ice cream cake from your fingers. Do it now, in front of everyone. And if what falls on the children lining up their cars for the soapbox derby is not snow, but ash, that's all right. Celebrate. And if you write notes to friends and senators and primary voters, that's fine. It's even okay to begrudge the stubborn pear in the wooden bowl. You're right, you know. They're waiting to yellow until you turn away. Right that in the economy of forgiveness, you keep coming up one daffodil short. It's all right if you ask your heart to grow the size of Secretariats, not because you run other horses or because your legs are classic, but because you too want to be buried whole after someone examines the insensible engine you left behind. I am of the beloved's name, no longer metronoming the valves, and places that slick fist in a stainless tray for weighing and shouts, "Sweet Jesus," before describing its ungodly heft with superlatives. Your heart, the most tireless, wildest, wiliest, thirstiest heat on record. Thanks again.
That was amazing, Tracy. I've been waiting to hear those poems in your voice. Amazing. Thank you. Our next reader is Tim Seibles, and he is the author of 6 poetry collections, including his 2 most recent, both published by Etruscan Press, One Turn Around the Sun in 2017 and Fast Animal in 2012, which won the Theodore Roethke Memorial Poetry Prize and was nominated for a 2012 National Book Award. I felt such joy and admiration reading Tim's work. What a warm heart beats within its pages. And Tim served as Poet Laureate of Virginia for 3 years, lucky Virginia. In Tim's latest book, One Turn Around the Sun, I was deeply moved by the poems of gratitude and compassion about his parents. In Ode to My Father, when trying to understand and forgive his father's gruff behavior, he says, his father's voice was a part of him too, that part that seemed tied up in some long ago trouble, even when he sat in the shade baiting a hook. And in Ode to My Mother, I so admire the imaginative feat as the speaker of this poem addresses himself as an embryo in the womb. And I don't know that I've ever read someone who is able to depict with such truth and tenderness the adolescent male waking to his sexual self. Here's a quote from a poem that I love from Fast Animal called Dolores Jeps. I don't think I've ever understood how lonely I am, but I was closer to it at 15 because I didn't know anything. My heart so near the surface of my skin, I could have touched it with my hand. As particularly in tune as Tim Seibles is with his own sentient self, he is simultaneously aware of his body and its place in the larger world of history and race. In his poem, The Debt, Siebels writes, the first people in this land with their long black hair, 7 of them are napping along my ribs. And the poem ends, what is the lesson of history, if not that we owe each other more bread, more friendship, fewer lies, less cruelty? Please welcome Tim Seibles.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Oh, you can, okay. All right. It's so nice to be here. It's wonderful to read with Tracy and Brian. They are my great heroes and hero and heroine. And also I love being a part of the Palm Beach Poetry Festival. It's just, you know, it's a great thing. I'm sorry we're not in Palm Beach. That's all I can say. I'm going to read poems, I guess, in different tones and just different colors and so on. And this first poem is a poem in which the poem is a character. I've done a series of these. I think the first one, the thing that's something like it was Larry Levis's The Poem You Asked For, which came out, I guess, in the 70s. But I'm sure there are other people who have played with this notion. But I'm in that tradition now for this piece. The title goes right into the body of the poem. With no hat, no shirt, no pants, the poem walks the early afternoon. Summer sun spots the odd shape on the road and offers a cloud for shade. The poem is headed downtown with its revelations, its beauty, all the intricate parts, finally open to the general public, who, though they tried to deny it, have always wanted to see beneath the vintage clothes. The poem's previous modesty and stealth, its humility and restraint, its patient, soft-spoken invitations have served no one, really, not even the poem itself, which has always wanted the spotlight. The red carpet, the sequined gown, the top hat, velvet lapels, ruby slippers, all its big front teeth inlaid with gold. The first people the poem passes look, look away, look again, their hope swelling like a fresh bump on the head. One guy tries 911, but the 9 begins to shimmy like a new disciple, and the man's afro bursts into cotton candy. The poem loves it, loves being out, being seen. The almost cool walk flips to a Denzel stroll. I'm kicking new flavor in your ear, it says unquietly, meeting the eyes of drivers who swerve so sure they see what must be a mirage, a buck-naked angel rump shaken beside the witless sprawl of their lives, their heads anointed with apocryphal music. The cars refuse the road, their horns reborn, scatting a fanfare of funkadelic clarinets. This is my body, the poem says. Take and eat. I was doing some research on the banjo just because I'd heard a lot about the banjo and really knew nothing about the banjo. And so I wrote this ode as a kind of, I guess, song of praise, and for me at least, revelation about the banjo itself. It's just called Ode to the Banjo. Not the cold night howl of the cello, not the soul-rolling scold of the sax, no flash fire frenzy of flamenco guitar, nor the oboe's hypnotic threnody. We all know your call, brother banjo, your sweet choirs of glee, the giggle of children spritzing your frets, that touch of puppy love, ecstatic and blue, each note quick, complete, as if your pot belly were already almost too full to speak. Where did you get that savory tang? How far have you traveled? What oceans, what ancient music still stashed in your magic bones? The ngoni, the lute-like xylem, the long-necked akonting, your African ancestors. The music is proof. The people who brought you here were more, always more than slaves. Your friendly notes, a gaggle of drunken bells, songbirds, small stars the lonely bring to light the coming dark. If a heartful song could unspill all the blood lost in this world, it would be yours, your plucky laugh, your aria so often misunderstood. How many centuries have you sprung into music? All the years, a single melody mapped in your grin. Who would dare mock your wise and supple ways? Only those who do not know that they do not know the truth for which you play. 5 fingers, 5 strings, 5 secrets, forever told, but never given away. the dollars. It has an epigraph, this poem. The epigraph is, I'm all in, the dollars. Do they own you? Do they make you do whatever they want? Do they own you? Do you work and pay and work? Are you nervous? Is it hard to sleep? Do they got you? Was it hard to wake up? What about your hair? Does it keep happening? Are you doing your best? Do you need a little something? Are you dressed? Are you getting dressed? Are you almost dressed? What about your hair? Are you tired? Are you hard to wake up? What time is it? How about now? Do they need more? Do they make you? Did they make you over? Are you half dressed? Do they own you? Do you think what you're supposed to? Are you saving? Who are you saving? Are you nervous? Are they watching? Is it hard? Do you ever wake up? Do they own you? Do you wake up when they want you to? Are they everywhere? Are you on time? How about now? How about now? Do you do the work? Did you do the do? Did they do you? Are you trying to get dressed? Are you? Did you? Will you? Do they own you? Do they still own you? This is a poem called Lucky. One of the wonderful people in my workshop mentioned it, and I will read it for Lolita. I believe that's who mentioned it. I wrote this poem after the mass killing at Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. It opens with two lines from a poem by W.S. Merwin. Some of you will recognize the lines. Rain falls into the open eyes of the dead, again, again, with its pointless sound. Once, I thought I knew how to read this, but I have fooled myself, afraid to see the blind lobby, this bad dream, this thanatocracy that runs my country. I remain astonished by certain calculated ignorance. In spite of all the grief, in spite of all the marches, the idea that brown skin is a reason to stop a life. So it remains hard to be Black here, and of course, hard to be female or poor or queer, whatever your complexion. Will it take much longer? How long before we know each execution, each exit wound prints the lost blood on all of us? Each of us often alone, opening a door, hoping to dance with someone who, for a moment, sees only the promise of rhythm holding our faces. This morning, fresh light opened your eyes and told you that this is what eyes do. Show the world, no matter what, no matter how much we don't want to see, how life breaks in. Breaks a day that seemed like other days. A Monday when you ran errands, slightly annoyed by the price of bread. Then the TV voices, adding up the casualties, sorry for conflicting reports, wondering what the whichever community is feeling, given such terror, given such a terrible thing, given this systemic insanity packaged and delivered as if by secret courier. I have been close to some killings, not many. When that shooter held the bell tower in Texas, I was a boy in a city up north where boys like me joined gangs to bleed each other. And now in Florida, this, with me, a grown-up in Virginia. And a year ago, 9 Black folks shot in their church by some sick fuck supremacists. And yesterday, another brother murdered by a badge in Minnesota, Louisiana, Illinois. This is not bad news. This is America, rubbing your eyes, lighting your whole day with death. And you might believe that you were blessed not to have been there, not to have your missing face taped to a wall, not to, quote, know any of the people who died, unquote. But that's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to talk about. This daze, this near intoxication, this feeling lucky that the blood on TV isn't yours, that you're all right again, that it isn't you again who's dying. Earlier today, Gregory Orr read Villanelle, and he mentioned the blues in one of them. And I've written a series of villanelles that I call Blues Villanelles. So this is sending out to Greg Orr. I guess this poem is kind of in conversation with all villanelles, like, I suppose. Anyway, this is called Little Star Blues Villanelle. Someday, no one will wonder where you are. Your name won't be on anyone's mind. Remember, twinkle, twinkle, little star? Count up the hours you scratched in your car. Where were you going most of the time? Someday, no one will wonder where you are. Maybe you think I take things too far. I think it was Mom who taught me to rhyme. She sang, twinkle, twinkle, little star. Some days die like big bugs in the tar. Who was that small boy at the start of your mind? Someday your mother won't know who you are. Would have been nice to be crowned the czar. Tell everybody else what to do all the time. You better twinkle, twinkle, little star. What you think makes people work so hard? Like money's some mountain we're supposed to climb. One day, no one will wonder how you are. Mostly what kills me won't leave any scar. I bet I know why most people go blind. They need twinkle, twinkle, little star. Let's sit in the shade by that tree in the yard and chew on the hours with their lemony rind. Someday, no one will wonder what you are. Remember, twinkle, twinkle, little star. This is a poem called Either Way and I wrote this for Cornelius Eady. I mentioned the miracles in this poem, and some of you, of course, know who Smokey Robinson is, but his group used to be Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. Most people don't even think about his backup singers anymore, but I grew up listening to Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. Either way. Days when something grazes my shoulder. Sunlight, sidewalk, the shadows sharp. The sky holds a cold, unbreakable blue that says, why look up here? Doesn't seem like so far back. Couldn't dance, scared of girls. I heard Smokey sing, go into a go, go, with that soft crystal in his voice. Pictures, music caught somewhere in my head. I'm sick of memory. My younger self still inside, wanting a way out of this, who I am now, this busy all the time, this itch middle of my back. But who was that kid in the basement, all alone with the miracles moving his feet? The orange couch covered in plastic, black marks on beige linoleum. Something about solitude, if you can stand it, makes you feel wise. The voice in your head talking its way somewhere, pressing you to believe what it says. And though you can't remember when, you grow into it, or you don't. Each thought breaks into the next, keeps on, turns back. Either way, you don't ever really understand. Just as you get used to the snow shingling your hair, your idols, one by one, begin to leave. Their old tunes fill the coffee shops and gently bob your head. What is it that your life forgot to mention? Hum a few bars, you say. This is a poem called Something Like We Did. It has an epigraph from Sun Ra. Some of you know who Sun Ra was. And there was a song he had, or a composition called Space is the Place. I think it was the name of an album also. Something Like We Did. Space is the place. You could tell they were surprised that we still tried to build cities. The way you and I might be amazed that birds can build nests without hands. They saw how we lived and made a sound like rain sifting a river. For a lot of us, knowing we were not alone brought relief from the headache that had lasted all our lives. Of course, some people were scared. The religious held on to their books, claiming this was all make-believe, even when it was undeniable. The 61 ships stacking light in the clouds, emerald green at dawn, lavender in late afternoon, the engines nearly quiet, as if the sky were breathing. They walked something like we did, but the right foot moved twice for each step of the left. So it appeared they were either testing the ground or considering a dance. Their skin was dark, but transparent. Their hearts like ours, but visible. And when the military began to mobilize, all the big weapons turned into barrels of wine, and whatever we tried with knives or guns we somehow ended up doing to ourselves until it seemed insane, even to us. Each time one of them spoke, it was like a piano if Cecil Taylor were playing, voices bending the air the way chimney swifts swoop, half turn, sling back. But after a while, when they watched us, their lips shimmered and something long ago closed their eyes, as if we were a memory of who they once had been. And they'd come to Earth to prove their existence, to mark the promise of another world, someplace we might actually go if we could see inside ourselves and trace what was there. Thank you very, very, very much. It's a real pleasure to read to people and to be among writers and thinkers and poets and big spirits. Thank you very, very much.
Wow, what an ear and what a beautiful reading voice. Just mesmerizing and wide, so wide. Thanks, Tim. I first heard Brian Turner read at the Dodge Poetry Festival a few years ago when Here Bullet first came out from Alice James in 2007. I was, of course, impressed with the power behind his poems, but I was equally impressed by his involvement with veterans which he described to the audience. Brian held up his phone and gave us all his number, saying that if anyone had any ideas about how to help veterans through post-war life, that we could text him and that he would respond. I so love and admire when poetry can reach out of its sometimes insular world into the daily lives of others in such a meaningful way. Brian Turner's latest book, My Life as a Foreign Country, a Memoir, has been described by Nick Flynn as achingly disturbing, disturbingly, shockingly beautiful. Brian's latest book of poetry is called Phantom Noise and was published by Alice James in 2010. To give you an idea of how universal Brian's poems are, get ready for this list. They've been translated into Arabic, Chinese, Dutch, French, German, Hebrew, Italian, Polish, Serbo-Croatian, Spanish, and Swedish. And I won't even cite the specifics of his publication credits. Let's just say everywhere. Here's the opening of just one of Brian's amazing poems from his latest book. The poem is called Al-Aima Bridge. They fall from the bridge into the Tigris. They fall from railings or tumble down, shoved by panic, by those in the crushing weight behind them, mothers with children, 70-year-old men clawing at the blue and empty sky, which is too beautiful. Please welcome Brian Turner.
Thank you so much, Sally. Can you hear me? Yep. Hey, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the festival. Miles, thank you for the vision, not just for this year, but for so long now that you've added to contemporary poetry in America. It's such an honor to read with Tracy and Tim, and I'm a huge fan. So I don't know what I'm doing now about to read. I'd rather we just all go and talk about it. But I'll add some poems, and I think I'll start with maybe something that I think of as a kind of pathological intimacy of war. So this is tagging off of what Sally had started to talk about, but it's called Last Night's Dream. In the dream, her breasts become confused in my lips. I shoot an azimuth to her navel while her fingertips touch me with concussions, as if explosives rang through the nerves of my body, as if I'm strung with wire, a huge receiver of UHF radio transmissions, frequency hopping with our tongues as we kiss, and I slide into her with a sound of flashbang grenades that make her eyes cloud over and smoke from the heat of it. In the dream, she kisses Arabic into my skin, and I understand every word of it. I transcribe it backwards into cuneiform and stone. I rename the arteries and veins for every river and wadi, from Dohuk north to Basra south. I feel for this geography of pleasure. My tongue is a marker that writes even in the rain, even in salt and sweat, and I write with it now over every curve and turn of her body. In the dream, our orgasm destroys a nation. It leaves thermite and gunpowder in the air above us, a crackling of radio static as we kiss on, long into the denouement of skin and fire, where medevac helicopters fly in the dark caverns of our lungs. And we breathe them, one to another, a deep rotor wash of pain and bandages. I've been thinking about that for years. You know, I was an infantry soldier in Iraq. I was a sergeant. And I was been thinking about, I wrote that poem when I was in Iraq in my notebooks. And I was thinking about that pathological intimacy between nations. That's really what the poem was about. It wasn't about a specific lover in my mind. For me, that's not how the poem works. But I was thinking about how for years and years, we've been breathing this deep rotor wash of pain and bandages. And, or have we? I don't know. It seems like we've been, as a country, just, and I've said this many times, but it hasn't changed, that we can wage war across the globe in ways, the way our body works with the autonomic nervous system. Like, I don't have to think about breathing right now necessarily, or my heartbeat, or the circulation of blood within me. But if you dunk my head underwater, I'll quickly have to start thinking about breathing. And what does it take for a nation to have its head dunked underwater so that it might think about the pain and trauma that is taking place and that we're connected to across the globe? Maybe it takes that militarization coming home. You know, we see it in the streets now. The military equipment that is given to throughout our police forces and different units and things. The people storming the Capitol, the gear that they wore, the militarization of this militia, you know. I think of Abu Ghraib, I think of the prisoners I saw in Iraq, for example, and I can see how we took that home too, and we caged children on the border. We've learned overseas and we brought those lessons home. But what will it take for us to have our heads plunged underwater? This is called Call It Leaves and Rain. I was walking through the middle of my life, walking down to Visadero Street, wearing old desert combat fatigues, listening to the antifreeze boil over. I was listening to the antifreeze boil over in conversations on the street, that dead-end steaming hiss of radiators run 100,000 miles and more. The radiators boiled over in fatigue while I was walking 100,000 miles down to Visadero Street in Fresno, and it was July, and the asphalt was speaking its vapor, and I was wearing combat boots and walking through the middle of my life. I was listening to war. I was listening to war on Visadero Street and learning how to ride low through the rest of my life, learning how to walk the blocks in tighter and tighter circles, the way the lost do. In tighter and tighter circles, I was lost to the war on Visadero Street. I was circling the war the way vapor curls from the steaming hiss of dead radiators in Fresno. I was circling the lost in Fresno, wearing my combat boots worn down 100,000 miles and counting. And I was counting. I counted each dying face passing by. I counted the birds with their exhausted voices. I counted the sentinel birds perched silent in the eucalyptus trees above. I circled the eucalyptus birds and listened for their medicine the way the lost do in Fresno, wearing combat boots and speaking in vapor. I was circling through the middle of my life, right there under the medicine trees, listening to the silence of the sentinel birds and waiting for them to boil over in steam. But that's not what medicine birds do. Medicine birds break open in orange and red. They have eucalyptus leaves for feathers and bandage the air when they fly. Medicine birds fly through the windows in the head, impervious to glass. They are impervious to war and hiss and steam and vapor and combat and the circling lost. Medicine birds fly through the windows to land in our beds when we're dreaming our circling dream of Divisadero and Fresno with its lost and circling war. Medicine birds have eucalyptus wings, and when they fly in our beds, they transform themselves into leaves and rain and lovers. The lovers in our beds are eucalyptus birds flying medicine through the windows in our heads. The lovers in our medicine beds fly eucalyptus through the circling loss. They bring medicine to our lips and call it eucalyptus, call it love, call it leaves and rain for our exhausted souls. Maybe I'll switch to a few poems that I'd like to read some poems from Elise Kuznets and myself. Elise, some of you knew Elise very well. My wife, I'm her husband. She I don't know the language for it. Hospice people say that she crossed over in 2016 from cancer. I don't have the language yet. The English language fails me. The tenses, the verb tenses don't work. There isn't a verb tense for how I need to be able to be in conversation with her so that other people can be comfortable in their life. But here are some poems going back and forth with the two of us. The first one's called Summertime. And some of you will hear a riff of, there's a little bit of Galway Canal here, I hope. It's called Summertime. Barefoot, we walk through torpedo grass at noon, lightning flashing over the St. Johns River, the shoreline banded for miles in tannins' metallic gradations, bull alligators drifting in the far shallows, and not one word spoken, just this shivering under an old hickory, the rain falling hard, waves splashing against cypress knees. With the sound of honeybees caught in blossoms of tar flower, our mouths hum, our limbs envelop each other the way foxgrape climbs, voicing its fruit among the air plants above. The arched soles of my feet press down into deadfall and leaf rot as we unbutton the afternoon by touch, by kiss, by the sliding heat of muscle and groove, that sweet friction of bodies, which returns the gods to earth once more, frogs announcing their return in unison, to witness how stubborn and beautiful the human frame is in defiance of the inevitable, if only for an afternoon on the St. Johns River, clap of thunder in the distance. Love, I've spent a lifetime counting the thunder down. Let the gods express themselves in the ruin of water and stone, and let the dead stand among us, silent in their deep reserve. We will kiss until the pleated tips of the palmettos burn in copper and bronze. We will kiss until we are charged with a trembling voltage, until our bodies connect heaven and earth. If I could do this, it's odd on Zoom, but I guess I would lean this way and read the poem this way, but the way the light's set up, I have to do it here. So apologies for the for the commentary of how to do this. Limestone. Several million years it's taken the ocean's fingers murmuring at the burren to smooth each rib of limestone down into these perfect circles and ovals, while thin concentric bands record fault lines in the grain. Here, skeins of seaweed drift the length and breadth of the coast, spongy cane, the wine luster of dulse, but deeper and more lovely are the glowing stones of this place, pearl and gray at dusklight, worn to a silky nub. And tonight, like the tide, your hands on my skin, brush and recede, then begin again. If anyone out there has tender ears, or you don't like a little bit of pepper in the language, you might want to turn to the side for a moment. There's just one word in here, but this is called Plexus, Albuquerque, New Mexico. It is the year 1967. It is 1944 or 48. It is 1832, and it is 12:16 a.m. It is last year or the one before it. It is time as mural, time as collage. It is the atom bomb exploding in our bed. It is our 7-year bodies shutting down to the core. It is my cock throbbing in Morse code. It is 100 million people and counting. It is a signature of touch. It is the bass drum we call our hearts. It is the ocean's desire for the moon. It is the tenor howl of the larynx. It is needles and bandages and care. It is skulls and the ladder of the spine. It is your eye and kaleidoscope. It is the blue cotton sheet which carries the sun. It is a solar flare at 8,000 degrees. It is 1 minute before I kiss you. Magpie. Never mind how they met. Sometimes in stories, the inexplicable happens. At first, the river of the universe is too wide for the parted lovers to cross. Their tears call the birds from the sky, and flocks of magpies gather to form a bridge, wingtip to wingtip, offering up their hollow bones for love's sake, which is why the magpie is considered a sacred bird. And if at dawn you spy only one, you must say, "Good morning, Mr. Magpie. Where's your wife today?" And this is because of Orihimne, the weaving princess, daughter of Tente, the sky king, and Hikoboshi, the cowherder, who wait on the glittering banks of Amanagawa, the infinite, longing river we must cross or be lost, drowned in the night's water, one feather dancing upon another. Here's one for Jack Gilbert fans. This one's called Farah. We were all Jack Gilbert's lovers, not in the world, but in the poems, in the world of the poems, dying on the rocky, broken slopes of hard islands in a blue country across the sea. Lovers carried in his arms for decades sometimes, more. The wind, a character that refused to lift the center of the word pain, where vowels fall into the letter N the way the summer, wheat-blazed and feral, pours into the cold weeks of November, winter in its bones to come. Jack loved us, not as a god or a devil, however nuanced, but as one who must attend to the difficult harvest of a life, to the losses and the simple grain that we might, if we listen beyond the howling in our own hearts, hear him singing of as he carries us up the dead mountain. How are you all doing out there? I hope you're doing all right. It's like sort of, oh, there's Tracy's raising a hand. Thanks for the, I appreciate Tracy. Thank you all for having me here. I really appreciate it. I've got just a few more here, if that's okay. This is called, this is at the Capela dos Ossos. It's set in Evora, Portugal. Sometimes with plague rooting in the town, corpses brimming from cemetery walls, holy men boiled the bones of the departed, raising cathedrals with timber hewn of silence, splayed arches of femur and tibia, grave gloomed pillars blistered by the bulbous protrusion of skulls, their calcium glow like memory's dull ache, repeating over and over, earth is the kingdom of the dead. How they, in their robed piety, wanted to believe such an offering would prove their devotion, the way, stripped bare, I offer myself to you, saying, "Beloved, let us inhabit this house of bone, cleave to one another, muscle and sinew, all our earthly years, our flesh, a taste of paradise." And this is called Wind Map Home. You say the deep geography of our lips delineates a language we think our own, but instead charts generations of the dead. Whole cities moored within a vowel. A boy from the 8th century singing to a bird in a yew tree rooted between consonants. You say this is how we will sing to one another in the centuries ahead, long after the scaffolding of muscle and bone is broken down, that will speak clearly at first in whole words tucked into sentences about coffee and neon and pleasure, then slipping into tones, diphthongs, aspirations, the words and letters crowding with the dead that join us, the language itself nearly unintelligible, you filling your lungs and singing in your high, sweet soprano so that we might hear you, so that I might hear you over the din, so that I might travel letter by letter back. And this is called Love Poem. I will be the invisible full moon filling your crescent of Genesee, the gondola gliding through your canal of Geiger. I will be the protractor that figures your angle of Ludwig, the compass arm drawn to your areas of Konheim. I will climb your pyramids of Malpighi, drink from your cistern of Piquet. I will stroke your philtrum and fill your antrim of Highmore with sweet scent. I will love each tract, column, and convolution of your body, your 70,000 miles of blood vessels, which end to end would form a rope encircling the earth, your heart that beats 100,000 times a day, then more's restive ward each night to me. And how about one last poem? And I really appreciate being able to be here tonight with you all. This is a poem of mine. I was flipping back and forth between Elise and I, and this one's called In the Surgical Theater. And I was sort of thinking of myself on the table and a doctor or a medical team looking down. When my scalpeled flesh opens its doors to light, I see how you struggle to find enough bandages, gauze, any form of medicine that might keep memory from escaping the human architecture I lived in during these few years I've called my life. I'm grateful for your care, the gentle way your hands move in tandem with your eyes when there's nothing left to be done. But it's time now. The decades will pour from me the way water pours from the old mountain. Whole cities will emerge as islands into the sea, fully formed, their streets the clear blueprint of a dream explored by those walking the sidewalks or waiting in the stalled lanes of traffic or making love in the buildings that house them up high. Soon enough, the palace of memory crumbles to stone. We stand among the ruins afterward, there in the graveyard of all that once was, all the time we had, all the world thrumming within us, and all the world lost. Remembering the things we'd seen and done, saying to ourselves as much as to one another, earth, sky, wind, rain, laughter, wonder, sorrow, flight. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your brilliant readings, Tracy, Tim, Brian, and thank you, Sally, for introducing them. Following this reading, tonight's poets will be signing individual book plates for the books you purchase in our virtual bookstore, Murder on the Beach, from 9:30 to 10:30 p.m. And don't forget to attend tomorrow's craft talks with David Baker and Vievee Francis at 2:00. What a wonderful, wonderful poetry reading. Let's hear it for our fabulous, brilliant, soul-restoring poets.